Well, hi guys. Welcome back to Ponderings from Palm Coast. I'm Mark Webb, and today I have a great representative, someone that has some phenomenal deep backgrounds with the city of Palm Coast, among other things. Jim Manfre, thank you so much for coming by and spending some time today. So, briefly, what got you here to Palm Coast? And then we're going to dive right into some of these more important issues we want to talk about.
Although I'm a native New Yorker, originally born in Brooklyn, raised on Long Island, my dad moved to South Florida when I was young. So I've been brought up in both areas, so very familiar with the issues of growth in Florida. And I had spent the first 20 years of my career working in law enforcement as a detective investigator in the Bronx DA's office, an assistant DA in Suffolk County. When I came here, it was after 20 years of doing that, was to do something different. And so that's what I came here in 1999 with my wife and 3 kids, who were still young at the time, to create a new life, like most Palm Coast residents, more sunshine, less traffic,
no snow,
less crime, all the good things that Palm Coast contained, and so that's what I did, and somehow got elected sheriff after living here for 2 years, which is a story in of itself. But my wife is in commercial real estate, and I came here with her to create commercial opportunities here in Palm Coast, which were lacking then and even more lacking today.
Yeah, no, we haven't moved that needle very far, have we?
Not at all.
So you touched on being a sheriff and being on that side of it. One of the things that many of us have been struggling with is the effectivity of the sheriff department and how that benefits the town of Palm Coast. I don't know if a lot of you know this, but Palm Coast has a contract with the Flagler Sheriff's Association group, and we pay them annually a bit of money to provide additional services for us. What do you know about the additional services, and what's going on with that, Jim?
Well, let me give you some history, because I think it will lead us to some answers to your question. So in 1999, when I moved here, there was no city of Palm Coast. There was a county and a service district, which was advisory to the county commission. And it was very clear there was an animus between the Flagler County Commission, which were mostly people who are from the west side, and the service district on providing services to the residents here that were growing. When I moved here, there was 42,000 people living in Palm Coast.
But the law enforcement support even back then was through the county.
Was the Flagler County Sheriff's Office.
Okay.
So there was always this. Flagler Beach had its own police department. City Bunnell had its own police department when I came here, and I think historically that has been the case. When I became sheriff, the city had just been formed. So there was a referendum in the past. And so I met with the then city manager, Dick Kelton, who was the first city manager, and he explained to me that he would like to continue the services, law enforcement services with the county, with the sheriff's office, but he would like to do that under a contract. He was familiar with that paradigm because he was an assistant county administrator in Volusia County when they came up with that idea with Deltona. So Deltona has contracted services with the Volusia County Sheriff's Office. So we went through this process of creating a contract together. And what I said to him, and I've said it for the 26 years I lived here and said here and stated today, there is no reason in the world for the city of Palm Coast residents to be paying one more penny to the sheriff's office. Nothing changed from the time that the city was not incorporated to the time it became incorporated. Crime didn't jump up. In fact, in my first 4 years, crime went down dramatically. So this idea that we have enhanced level of service is just made up. It's a fiction. What law enforcement provides to the sheriff's office, the sheriff in every county, is required to respond to any service call in their jurisdictional area. In some counties, the sheriff has the old county, no small police departments. Sometimes, like, there are cities like in Palm Beach where you have smaller police you have police departments which are actually bigger than the sheriff's office in terms of response time. But here in Flagler County, the sheriff responds to probably 90%, 95% of all calls that are generated through our 911 system. So nothing changed when the sheriff's office, or when the city became the sheriff's office. And my position with Dick Dick Kelton was that you don't have to pay me an extra penny to service the city of Palm Coast. In fact, I believe it'd be, taxing residents twice because they provide the same level of service in the unincorporated areas as Palm Coast. There's not a point in which we say, you know what, you guys have taken up too much of our time, we're not responding anymore. I would get indicted for doing that. So it's a misnomer. It's based on a false premise that somehow the sheriff could not respond in the county where there isn't a local police department to any call out in that particular area that he services. It's nonsense. And Dick's response to this conversation was that he was concerned that if we did not have some money being paid by the city of Palm Coast, that if there came a point where the sheriff was not providing, a future sheriff was not providing appropriate service, that there would not be money in the till already to create a police department. So my response to that was, that should never happen. That if there came a time where a sheriff was no longer providing service to the city of Palm Coast, which was the largest entity, they would vote that sheriff out. And so, anyway, I lost that argument with him, and we established, I think the first was about a million.
So wait a minute. As the sheriff of Flagler County, you turned down or attempted to turn down additional monies from Palm Coast.
Yes.
To offer services for Palm Coast because we already pay county taxes, property taxes for that service. Just kind of want to make that clear because some people, maybe even you, don't realize that you're paying twice. So now, I just wanted to capture that.
So no, and it's the most essential point in this argument is that if the city said today, you know what, we're not renewing this contract, you provide service. The sheriff, there's a case on this where a community in Alachua County said, we're giving up our police department, it's become too expensive, and sheriff, you have to, respond to all our calls. And the sheriff sued and said, you have to provide enhanced services. And they lost. You as a sheriff are responsible to respond to any call, whether it's traffic related or it's criminal related or whatever, just the normal, is someone okay? I haven't heard from my aunt in a couple of weeks. Can you go by there?
Health
Right.
check.
And again, there's so many misnomers in this conversation, is that there is, I don't know how many there are now, but when I was my last year of sheriffs, and I'm very believe in metrics, and I think the metrics tell the story rather than the politics. And the metrics show that out of 200,000 service calls that we got called out for, that of those 200,000 calls, only about 10 to 15,000 of those occurred or resulted in a ticket being issued, which was the most likely event, or an arrest being made. So that meant that 80% of the time, deputies were doing the normal things. They were knocking on doors if there was noise complaints, or there's a loose dog, or there's an alligator running across the street. We get called out for all those kind of things. So the idea that the sheriff's office is providing enhanced service in it's not in my opinion, it's a fact, is not true. That if you just eliminate this $11 million doesn't buy you any more service, because the sheriff would have to respond to whatever was happening in the city, regardless. Whether we had, if we did not have a city, let's say there was no city, he'd have to respond to all those calls. So because we have a city, he's no longer responsible. That's not the law, and it's ludicrous. And in my opinion, I think when I left, the budget was about $25 million countywide, and it was about $3 million for the city services. Again, I never asked for a penny more. It was always the city basically forcing me to take increases that I did not believe were necessary, because of this position that I believe is the right one. And now the budget, I believe, is over $50 million.
53.
So it's more than doubled. The population is, when I left, was about 106, and now it's what, 136? So,
Yeah.
It has gone up, but the crime has not gone up, because the people that are coming here are older people.
Right.
And the age that commits crimes are the 16 to 25 year olds, which we have not an increase. We have not had an increase in the student population in 15 years. So we're not Daytona or Jacksonville. We're a much older community, and we do not need the level of service. The present sheriff keeps on using this 2.5 per thousand as a metric for how many deputies he needs. Well, that 2.5 is a national average. And if you're in Jacksonville, they probably need 2.5 sheriffs per thousand. But this Flagler County, we do not have the same call-outs. We do not have the same level of crime. We don't have violent crime. We don't have gangs. We don't have huge traffic issues. We have, isolated traffic issues, but not large traffic issues. And so my level is about 1.6, because that was the average for counties of our size. So this huge increase, which comes on the backs of taxpayers, it's not coming from, some state fund or some federal it's coming out of our pocket, is not only, frustrating and taxing our residents, but it's also taking money away from the infrastructure issues that we so desperately need to respond to, whether it's sewer and water or road maintenance or whatever those things are, or our safety net, which is almost non-existent in this county. All that money is being sucked out for things that we need. Now, I'm in favor of, and I know the first thing that the present sheriff would say, oh, you want to defund the police. I don't want to defund anybody. I want to provide adequate level of services for every unit of government in the most efficient manner. And one of the things I can explain to people is that the way the sheriff's office or any law enforcement set up is you set up your manpower per zone, right? So what you do is
Well, it's called a district now. They
district.
changed it recently.
So
I just learned that.
whatever the nomenclature is
there are
that
3 districts in the county.
basically what you do is you look for the service calls. So you take an area of the city. Let's just take take the northeast corner of Flagler County, where we are now.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you look at the northeast corner and you say, okay, how many calls for service have we had in that area? How much crime have we had? And let's decide how much manpower we need. So for the northeast corner, relatively, it's not as occupied as some of the other areas. You probably only need 1 person in that zone. You go to the west side of the northwest side, well, that's more heavily populated, right? The W's, the beginning of the W's and the B's, more people there. And so you look at your levels of call-outs and you say, well, this is X plus 10. We need 2 zone officers there. And that's how you apportion all of the county. Doesn't matter if it's a city, it doesn't matter whatever it is, that's the way law enforcement works. You can put your manpower in where you need. And by the way, it's not like they sit in their zone and they don't move. If you're in zone 2 and zone 1 needs backup, zone 2 goes up to backup. It's a fluid situation. And one of the first things that I did in my second term was the former sheriff had divided the county in half. And this was the North District and this was the South District. And each district had its, a corporal, lieutenant, and a captain. That was what the system was used in then. There is no reason. We're not big enough to have zones like that. So you had competing districts. You had, captains here, lieutenants here, lieutenants here. So I came in, and by the way, Rick and I agreed, this is nonsense. We don't need that. So we compressed it all into one zone. And it worked. And what we were able to do is reduce the amount of top heaviness. And also the idea that, well, that's a north district problem or north zone problem. So those are some of the ways that we've gotten here. Now Staley has come in and has re-implemented that. And a lot of the increases in the budget, should go to the bottom level. I agree those guys should get paid as much as they should, incommensurate with cities and counties of our size. Not Jacksonville, which, again, you work a lot harder in Jacksonville or downtown Daytona than you do in Flagler County, so it should be commensurate with the size. But what's happened is he's exploded the supervisory class. When I was there, it was 4.5 to 1 ratio of deputies to supervisors. The last time I looked, and I haven't looked recently, it was like 1.5 to 1. The highest salary when I was there, and again, it's not that long, it's 2016, it's not like 1996. So things haven't changed that much. The top salary was $100,000, other than myself as the sheriff, which was $130,000 by statute. Now, I believe he pays his number 2, Mark Stobridge, $150,000. So you have all of those lieutenants and commanders making $100,000, which to me is unnecessary in Palm Coast. $80,000 and $100,000 is a good salary in Palm Coast, in my opinion.
Well, in the last contract, 2024-25, if you read within the presentation of the contract, he was justifying the increase in a couple $1 million, I believe it was 9 new deputies. I think 5 were at the initiation of the October timeframe when the contract started, and another 4 just this last April to enhance and improve Palm Coast. And I have yet to prove that not one deputy has been assigned permanently to Palm Coast. Is that even a thing?
So this is, again, when you say you're going to add in a budget year, so the budget is from October 1st to September 30th. So you put your budget in May 1st. It gets approved in September. October, you do not get all your money at once. You get it in 12ths.
Right.
That's how it comes to you. They don't just hand you, $53 million. They divide it by 12, and the same thing with the city. Divide it by 12 and give you that. So it takes almost a year to hire a deputy. So if you're saying I'm putting 6 new deputies on the road, well, those deputies are not going in that budget year. It takes 2 to 3 months to recruit people, get them through the process, get them trained before they are ready to take on a zone. You just don't hire people off the road. And so, when you're hiring people in that budget year, they're not even coming in until the following budget year. And so the issue is that, are you basing these increases on actual numbers? So it's all you have to do is look at call-outs. Okay? It doesn't matter how big the population is how many call-outs are you getting in the city of Palm Coast. So if the city of Palm Coast, which gets probably 90% we have 90% of the population, we get probably 90% of the call-outs. If there's somehow some kind of increase in a particular area, all of a sudden we see in this zone, we see an uptick in crime, car burglaries or drug use or something like that. Mm-hmm. You then flood the zone with additional resources. You don't flood the whole place with resources. You put it in particular areas. Now, the other thing that creates this pressure on the budget is what we call his philosophy of law and order. But if you use the community-oriented policing model, which is get people cars on the roads, crime is deflected by
Visibility.
visibility. It's the number one issue.
Slows me down on Belterre when I see a sheriff sitting there under the tree.
And that's
Don't know what they're doing there, but it's
Yeah.
effective.
the whole idea is, and I have no idea if he does this anymore, is that every hour I had a map of where every zone deputy was. There is whatever you call a signal on the car, and I could go on the map and see where everybody is. So if I saw people moving around, I was happy. If I saw 4 cars under a bush somewhere, I'd call the sergeant in that area and say, okay, break it up, go out and that creates the presence and
Right.
the safety net that you need. So I have no idea what Rick's philosophy is right now, but the whole idea behind community-owned policing is to engage the public in law enforcement, is to get out of your car, you're driving down the street, hey Joe, how's it going in here? See a teenager walking, everything okay here? That provides more safety than as many deputies as you want to put on the street. But having said all that, I want to get back to the original thing. The original issue is that the city of Palm Coast, if today said, you know what, we're giving up our incorporation, we're done. Not one thing would change in the sheriff's office. Not one thing.
No, the people still need law enforcement.
They need law enforcement. You need
Yeah.
traffic. You can't. The sheriff has responsibility. And again, even if there is cities inside, the sheriff has an overlay function.
Right.
So, for instance, the city of Bunnell, small police department, when they have homicides, they don't have the ability to do that. So the sheriff's office is an overlay to them. If they have, crowd control issues, the sheriff is an overlay.
But I believe Bunnell and Flagler Beach both have similar additional contracts for those type of exceptional services, like detectives and
To the sheriff's office?
To the sheriff's office.
It's called mutual aid. So
Right.
what you do is, you see what's happening in Los Angeles. So what happens is that all the law enforcement agencies have mutual aid agreements with each other. So you have, all the sheriffs have mutual aid agreements. All 67 sheriffs have mutual aid agreements with each other that if, for instance, if something was happening in Sarasota County and they needed resources because their county was just devastated by a hurricane, all the sheriffs will provide their services. What do you need? We're here to do it. You saw it in 9/11. When 9/11 happened, NYPD was flattened. All across the country, people provided service. You see
Exactly.
with forest fires. So these mutual aid agreements
Right.
are, similar. So it's the same thing with Flagler Beach. If they need for parades, they can't handle a parade, the sheriff's office provides
Sure.
service. So you don't pay extra for that. You're paying it in your taxes. And my point and my argument is that the city should not be paying one more dollar.
Well, when I first moved here, and I lived in the county previously, I looked at my property taxes. I'm in the city, and I was trying to get my mind around why there was a county property taxation on my city house. And I've since learned that the county claims to provide sheriff services, and we've also learned that when you call for an aid car that comes to your home to take an emergency situation, those aid cars are county aid vehicles. Palm Coast doesn't have the contract because the aid cars that Palm Coast does have, they don't have the right to take you to any hospital, which is something else I learned recently going through the Citizens Academy of some aid cars can't take you to a hospital, but the county ones have that access.
Well, and that's a good point. So do Palm Coast residents pay additional money for the Flagler County Library?
They do. But they do not.
No.
We do not pay another dollar
You don't.
to use.
So there's a county service.
Yeah.
Mostly Palm Coast residents use that because we're 90% of the population.
Sure.
We're not charged extra. Do we charge extra for the ambulance service, which, as you pointed out, is a county service?
No, we do
do
not.
not. So why do we charge extra, or for the clerk's office? I can go through for the tax collector or for the clerk's office. or for the supervisor election. The city is demanding most of that service, 90% of the service. Do they charge us any extra money?
Right, because we're like 80% of the population of the entire county.
No, it's 100 out of 136.
Yeah,
So,
it's a lot.
yeah, I mean, so
No, we don't.
yeah, so I mean, no one of those agencies.
See, the sheriff in 1999 got us in that bucket. Who was that then? I'm just giving you a hard
I was the
time.
sheriff there. I was 2001.
Well, it's amazing how decisions of preference may. And for the record, I think our sheriffs do a phenomenal job. The interactions I've had with them have been great. They're supportive, responsive. This isn't about that.
This
is more about questioning and understanding for you, the citizens, on what your dollars are doing, because we know Palm Coast is in financial trouble.
And let me tell you one other point is that so from 16 when I left to 17 when I left to today, it's 8 years. So the budget has gone, the population has gone up by maybe 30%, and the so that's all the increases there. But what's happened is our budget has more than doubled.
Yeah.
So you now have $28 million in addition. So it's more than doubled. It's, what is that, 120%? But in addition, you had a perfectly good building that this county put $14 million into with principal and interest that will be paying off for the next 20 years. They walked away from that building because it had a little mold. I was in that building for 2 years. No one got sick. Yes, there was a little mold because of some issues with some drainage. You walked away from $14 million. You sold it for $750,000. The person bought it for $3.5 million. The person that is in there, my wife spoke to because he wanted to lease some space, and she said, "Is the building okay?" She goes, "We didn't have to do a thing to it. There was nothing wrong with the building." And you then spent $26 million for a new building, principal and interest. So that cost us $40 million. So in the last 8 years, Mr. Staley has cost us $30 million in budget and $40 million and an extra $26 million in this. You do the math.
So the reasoning behind getting that building, if I understand it, was to bring the sheriff's headquarters into the town of Palm Coast?
No.
Well, why did they want it to begin with?
Which one? The new building?
The building that they walked away from,
So
that they were going to convert into a sheriff station hub, or no?
No. So this is what happened. So first of all, the sheriff's, there was some discussion about the sheriff's office. All county buildings have to be in the head of the main city. So Bunnell is our seat. Mm-hmm. So the sheriff's office main function has to be in Bunnell. Right. So the original building that they built in 1992 was all the way up by the in the western part of the county near the jail. It was way too small. It was way too small in 2002 when I became the sheriff. The county was in the process of planning a new county center, new courthouse, new administrative building, a new building for the Department of Education, for the school district. And what they were supposed to do was that courthouse, which is an L, was supposed to be you, and the sheriff's office was supposed to be there, which I said, that's fine. Instead of building that, they built a new EOC and left that old building there. So now when I came back in 2013, the county said, well, we're building a new building. So I said, they gave me three options. They said, either we build this other wing of the county courthouse, you take over the EOC, or there's the old Bunnell Police Department, which we're knocking down, and that's a site too. So I said, which one would you choose? I said, give me the Bunnell Police Department. It's right across from the courthouse. Mm-hmm. It's plenty of space. It makes a lot of sense. For whatever reason, they decided not to do that, and they decided to build buy this old, ratty old hospital, which was worthless at that point and had to be completely renovated. But it was renovated. It was torn down. This whole idea there was mold in there, is nonsense. I was there every day. You know, my family's background is in construction. When they finished, you know, the process, there wasn't anything left but a concrete building. No, there was no roof, there was no wood, there was nothing. It was just a shell. There was no mold. I wouldn't allow them to move forward. This whole idea that there was mold in the place at the beginning is just absolute nonsense. And then they, you know, steam cleaned everything, and then they built out. So there was nothing wrong with that building. There was no reason to walk away from that building. And just $14 million out the window, or $40 million with this additional building that they built. But it had to be inside the seat of the county, which is Bunnell.
So, but we do have a secondary sheriff's office in Palm Coast, a small little satellite office.
Right. So that was my idea in 2001, was that the problem was that people didn't know where the sheriff's office. We were getting a lot of complaints. Where's the sheriff's office? We'd have to send deputies out. So I went to the city and said, look, why don't we provide a, you know, what I called a precinct.
Sure.
You know, a local precinct, which is now Island Walk.
Mm-hmm.
It was a COP office, you know, for our citizen observers. And I said, why don't we expand that office and build it out? Wildly successful. People loved it. They can go get fingerprints. If they had a complaint, they didn't want to.
Well, that's where most of the people reside.
Right. So, I mean, this is another boondoggle that Staley has wrought, is that, so we had that building, and then what happened was the former Sheriff Fleming put it in a very remote location right next to the car wash on Old Kings Road. It was very small. People didn't know where it was. So when they designed City Marketplace, the city moved their offices to City Marketplace. And so the city manager and I talked about it, and I said, well, why don't we put this district building, this precinct, right next to where City Hall is? So that's what we did. The city built it out, didn't cost us anything. Just the city paid the lease, and also their own people did the construction. So that was functioning fine. They then Staley decided to move that, and we have all of this land around the library. So the middle of the city is actually somewhere about, you know, where on Belterre and Royal Palms. That's sort of the center of where the city's population now moves slowly south. So it would make sense to have put the district office right next to the library. The county owned that land. You had all the services there because the library is there. The library has issues from time to time. Instead of doing that, he spent $1 million to buy an old bank building on Old Kings Road, which again is a remote location to where the population is, and put a bunch of money in, to refurbish it. So again, another $1.5 million. Oh, by the way, we can't forget that at his insistence, they spent another $1 million to buy the building up where the old Sears was, which turned out to be defective. So the county had to sell that off, lost money on that deal, then buy this building, which they did not have to buy when they had land where they could construct it from the ground up, you know, a service right next to the library. Another $2 or $3 million. You know, $26 million there, $14 million there. Now you're starting to talk about real change. So when people talk about, you know, government efficiency, this is an example from the very beginning, from the taxpayers of Palm Coast having to pay for a service that they should not have to pay for, to paying for all of these boondoggles that Staley has wrought on us. It's cost us $40-50 million.
It's a drain.
And again, it's not like a one-time cost. These are reoccurring costs because you're still paying for the old, operations center. You're paying for the new operations center, and every year you're paying for this, doubling in, increases. And most of it is I shouldn't say most of it, but a good portion of that increase has to do with salary increases. All organizations should be pyramids, right?
Mm-hmm.
Few people at the top, lots of people on the bottom doing the work. This organization is a pumpkin.
So getting back to the understanding of Palm Coast and its relationship with the county and the sheriff's department, do you feel, and when you were, that it would be a fair request, a fair ask of the city to see and be able to understand what those enhanced services are, what they're doing for the city? Because I was talking to a deputy sheriff and was asking why, when you look at the commander's daily reports, first shift, second shift, of their actions or whatever, why they couldn't denote what district, and Palm Coast is in District 2, to see objectively the activity that they're doing on a daily basis, to share, to see the effectiveness. And I would think the sheriff would love to come and stand in front of the city to justify all this great support and stuff they're doing for 90% of
But
his.
Mark, it's not. The premise is false. There isn't any enhanced
there,
services.
So there wouldn't be any data to show us?
Well, I mean, all you could do is show, again, if the city did not exist,
Right.
it would be the same data
Right.
as the city existing. You can't. I mean, I'd love to know what enhanced service you get. A traffic unit.
I was using their words.
No. I understand that, but this, I'm more frustrated by their, misleading the public, because this is all misleading information.
Yeah.
Is that, well, you wouldn't have a traffic unit without these. What do you mean you wouldn't have a traffic unit? You'd have a traffic unit if the city was there,
Sure,
or not there.
Right.
Would you have more? Are you paying for additional traffic? Why would you pay for additional traffic? You pay for what is necessary. And by the way, if you do things strategically, you don't need a traffic unit all day long. The amount of traffic that occurs in the city is, and again, we're mostly a retirement
It's
community.
very cyclic.
It's
Yeah.
very cyclic. It goes from like 7 or 8 in the morning to 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. By then,
We've all experienced that rush hour traffic
Right.
here in Palm Coast, right?
and then it
guys?
dissipates. The main roadway in Palm Coast, which people, it's right in front of our eyes. The main roadway with the most traffic is 95. 95 is our main street. Unlike almost every community on the east and west coast, 95 is usually at the outer edge of most communities. From Jacksonville, although it does go through Jacksonville, I have to say, but it's still an outer rim. US 1 is usually the main street in most communities in Florida. Again, not all, but in most. Here, 95 is our main street, and US 1 is an outer perimeter. So 95 is covered by FHP. Florida Highway Patrol covers that for the most part. Now, it's always a problem to get FHP to cover it as much as they do in Volusia and St. Johns County. But that's where most of our traffic is. I mean, people say, well, there's traffic issues on Palm Coast. There are traffic issues on Palm Coast and on 100 and Belterre, for whatever it is, for one reason. They don't synchronize the lights. In every other community,
that's a mess.
In every other community, there is software. You don't even have to. It's not like you have to sit there and push a button.
Right.
It will turn the lights on. The greens. They'll synchronize them during heavy traffic periods to get people through, and then in the lighter periods, they will unsynchronize a little bit to keep people from speeding through.
Sure, I've
There's not enough traffic.
If you go to Citizens Academy, they'll give you a tour of the utility department, and you will see the cameras for all the streetlights and all of the software and controls for all the lights. Their argument is, for example, 100, the lights are controlled by the state, not the city, so they're not able to do that. I don't know if I buy into that, but
I've talked to FDOT about this. It's all about pressure. We have city, we have Senate and also state representatives. You put the pressure on them to synchronize the lights. It's not
Sure.
that hard. It's a software issue. It's not like you have to have someone standing at every light and change it. It's a very minimal thing to do.
it's a big complaint here
And
in the
I just
city.
need to give you one, caveat here or disclaimer. I have no interest in running for the sheriff because this is the first thing when Staley hears about this. I didn't want to run for the sheriff both times. I was dragged into this. Didn't come here to run for sheriff. I was a prosecutor. I had never been, a street cop, which I think is the most honorable profession there is. I don't believe we give them enough credit for what they go through every day. I did my service. I walked away from tons of business opportunities to come here and clean up messes. So I have no interest in cleaning up Staley's mess. That should be a younger person. In my opinion, a very wise sheriff once told me, is that once you hit 60, you should not be in law enforcement anymore. You don't have the physical capacity, the mental capacity, and the people, for the most part, that you are supervising are 20 to 30-year-olds who are generations different than you.
Oh, yeah.
And
just technology alone is changed.
And I think, Rick is, I think, close to 70, if he's not already 70. We need a new, just like this conversation is nationally, we need a new group of leaders here. Someone who's looking at things not from the old ways. Rick Staley started in law enforcement in the 70s. He was taught by people who started law enforcement in the 50s. That's where he's grounded in. He came from a huge, a county of several million people. This is not Orange County. We don't need all this foo-foo stuff that he has. These Mustangs, chase cars. It's unnecessary. You don't chase anymore. We don't need all this fancy, taxi, deputy cars. It's all foo-foo stuff. And by the way, we haven't gotten to that, is the expense that has been created because he's, arresting people for minor crimes as opposed to diverting them into different programs. Civil citation program drove the amount of arrests in our high schools down dramatically and drove crime down at the same time. Putting 16-year-olds into the criminal justice system makes no sense because they're pushed.
It's like sending them to crime school.
It's not only
They
that,
run
it's that
through the system.
if a 16-year-old gets arrested, goes into court, and I was an assistant DA, they're usually for minor things. I mean, if they've committed homicides, then they should be, everything should be thrown at them. But for the most part, all these minor crimes that go through the system just clog up the system because they're minor crimes and they get basically dismissed in 6 months if they don't have.
Right.
Civil citation programs actually require them to do community service. And
Need more of that.
And
Sure.
all of these diversion programs, wherever they are done, one of the things that I haven't heard him doing is that a deputy doesn't have to respond to every incident. There are domestic incidents or there are community incidents that you can hire, and you do have inside the department, social workers,
Sure.
victims advocates who can go and better respond to these incidents rather than a guy with a gun who has more important things to respond to. So there's many ways to divert people out of our criminal justice, out of our jail, which was supposed to last 20 years, but I understand the prison population has almost gone up by 50% since Ms. Staley has gone in there. Most of those people in there are waiting trials. They're not sentenced prisoners. Very few
Right.
people are sentenced prisoners in there. So,
Well, I know that I heard it today. The city has decided that they're going to spend $300,000 of all of our money to upgrade all of the cameras on all the lights to improve the sheriff's ability to track vehicles, even though it's the sheriff's request to improve it. And our vice mayor, I think correctly, really questioned why is the city once again paying to augment, support, or improve the sheriff's efforts to do and function in their jobs.
it's a great point, Mark. So those are called LPRs, license plate readers. I instituted them. They've been instituted in many jurisdictions. They work really well. If you have, what they call be on the lookout, BOLOs, these license plate readers can pick up,
Right.
these vehicles and alert you the vehicle's in there. If there's a car stolen, if there's someone who's been, child's been kidnapped,
Sure.
these things work really effectively. But it's a share. I've never asked the city to pay for it. First of all, there's grants out there to do this, and it is a law enforcement. The idea that the city is responsible for all of these things that is a sheriff's responsibility is just a joke. He has now trained the city that every time he has a need, the city has to pay for it. Well, so that means when you say the city, it's us, the taxpayers. So
Clearly.
you are charging us twice. In our property taxes, we're paying for you, and now again in our city taxes,
Sure.
we're paying for you. Why? The people in the west side are getting license plate readers. Is he asking the people on the west side for more taxes? No. So this is the thing that does not make sense, and we need to address to the city and to Staley is why are we paying more for the same services that the unincorporated areas get? Just because we have more people? What does that matter? So we have more people, we pay more taxes. You pick, the hammock area. They pay a fraction of what the city of Palm Coast pays.
Oh,
So yeah,
I know.
they get less services. We get more services because we're paying more money into the bucket.
Well, I think in the argument on the other side of that, and I was talking to some Flagler Beach residents during the last First Friday, which by the way was phenomenal, even with the fear of rain, had a great turnout, band was good. But the Flagler Beach residents actually had an interesting take on why should they see a potential, if Palm Coast didn't pay that amount of money, then it's possible that the overall county property taxes could theoretically go up because the sheriff would still argue that he needs X amount of money to survive, to provide, and if Palm Coast wasn't going to give the extra money, then it would be nickels or quarters or whatever on everybody's.
Well, I would make the opposite argument.
But that's true, right? It would go up.
No, I would make the opposite argument. Is that the city of Palm Coast is subsidizing Flagler Beach and Bunnell.
We are.
Because he's using our resources to assist them. He would not have if the city, if the city of Palm Coast did not exist, the city of Flagler Beach or the city of Bunnell, they would have to hire all of these, crime scene techs and have a SWAT team or all these enhanced benefits that the city of Palm Coast pays for. We pay for all those things, 80%, and they have access to it. So we're subsidizing their services because they would not exist. They would have to be double, or at least, or I wouldn't say how much more, but they would have to be X plus more officers if the city was not paying all this money into the sheriff's office, so they have these resources to spend. So
you don't think the
I think it's
county taxes, property taxes, wouldn't reflect the loss of the money Palm Coast would be pumping directly into the sheriff's office?
I think it would make the sheriff's office more efficient.
Well, and that's
I think
always
it's
a goal we want to have.
The one
right?
thing about government,
Well, you mean, wait a minute, their chief of staff is the Doge guy who now is
Fox-
coming over to help us
right, the Fox
in Palm
the
Coast,
Fox in
right?
the hen house.
I believe that's what I heard our acting city manager specifically say, that the reason that, and I'm sidetracking your conversation a moment
no.
to just say, I heard her say we're bringing over Mr. Strobridge to assist with Doge efforts to improve the city's financial views and challenges, which everybody in the city's been asking for a long time.
So, and Mark, that's a great point. The whole issue, and this should not be a partisan issue, there isn't a taxpayer that I know of who would say they do not want government to run as efficiently as possible.
Absolutely.
And so what I always bring it back to is, because government is big and it looks like beyond my ability to understand it, every single person who owns an apartment, owns a home, owns a car, owns anything, has to every day figure out, how do I pay my bills? How much money has to come in for me to pay my bills? well, how much extra money do I need to take a vacation or pay for my kid's college education or buy a new car? Every day, every single person in the world goes through that. And the only way, if you want something in addition to what you have, you want a bigger home, a better car, you want to send your kids to a better school, you have to go and earn more money, or you can't do it. Well, in government, that's
how I was raised.
That's how I was raised too. But we in government, and this, I believe that I will make a political comment in my experience, that Republicans talk that talk, but they don't walk that walk. That when they get in, they talk about, yeah, government efficiency. When Democrats are in, as soon as Republicans get in, none of that talk is there. But what we all know is that throwing money at any issue is not the way you get better results. What you do is find the most cost-effective way to, solve that problem. So what we're doing, and this is what we have been, Staley and his group have been convincing us of, and maybe all government entities, is that the more money you give us, the better your life will be. Well, my response to that is, be more efficient with my money. Spend it more wisely. And lower my taxes by doing it, rather than me giving you more money. Right. I don't believe in Doge cuts where you cut just for the sake of cutting. Every place I have been, I've used metrics. I've worked for
too.
Towns, and my own practice is how do we make ourselves more efficient so I make more money or we spend less. So this idea if we give Staley more money, we get better results, is just nonsense. It's not how it works.
It's not true.
I mean, it could work if we just had an explosion in crime, or we had an explosion in youth population, and now we needed more, deputies or more specialists to attack that problem. That would be one thing. That's not happening here.
Right.
For 15 years, the crime has been very flat, has gone down, it hasn't spiked at all, spiked a little bit under Fleming. From me to Staley, it's been pretty steady, has gone down a little bit.
Sure.
And I'll give you an example of this, and I don't think we credit law enforcement enough, is that when I first came here, there were 450 burglaries in 2001. When I left, there was less than 200, and I think it's down around 150. So the population has tripled, and burglaries are down. So why is that? Law enforcement is better. We don't give law enforcement credit. They are better trained, they're better educated. We've used, technology to make us more efficient. Our 911 system is so much better. When I started in 2001, our system here was, they'd call you out, they'd have to write down the number of where they were going, they'd have to go to a map to find out where that place was. I instituted computers in the car. The call would come out into the computer, and it would give you directions to the location. And if you wrote an arrest report, you used to have to write out an arrest report, you'd have to find the supervisor, he'd have to review it, he would make changes, then you'd have to change it, sign it, then you'd have to bring it into the office, they'd have to bring it to the clerk's office would have to enter it. You know what happens now? He writes out his arrest report or his traffic ticket on a computer. It gets sent electronically to the sheriff's office and to the clerk's office. It saves you hours of time. So law enforcement has become more efficient. We have become better throughout the country. This idea that crime is up around the country is false. We're not giving credit to law enforcement for all the efficiencies that they have created, the better training, the better education. All of that goes into crime going down. In New York City, crime is down 90%.
Well, and I think, unfortunately, the term crime is so big of a brush that crime could be a jaywalker or crime could be a murder. And the statistical numbers of that are very misleading in the sense of, and I love you point out, burglaries. Well, today, it's a bad day to be a burglar in the United States because everybody has Ring doorbell cameras everywhere, and most of them, I'm learning, are automatically linked to the sheriff's department because they offer that service for free. So when you drive down your road and there's people that have rings, those are actually tied right to it. So technology has made that amazing. But I do want to go back
Can I just
briefly.
make one
yeah,
point
please.
too? Is that of all the crimes that are committed, felonies, and again, it depends on where you are. Felonies take, the things that burglaries, the rape robberies, things that we worry about, are less than 10% of all the crimes committed.
Exactly.
It's a small fraction. Crime is not out of control. Crime is more under control for all the things you just said and the things that I said.
Sure.
We are doing a better job. We've connected with each other, especially after 9/11. We realized that we have to all be eyes and ears, right? That was really drilled into our heads. And I think all of us have taken more responsibility. If I walked out here and I saw something suspicious of a house, I'd be on the phone in a second. And so would every other person in this community, in this country.
We would hope. We would hope.
I think so. I think people are more responsive to
Yeah.
being included in that, and that has all gone towards crime going down, and which especially in Flagler County should I had a person and one of my neighbors who lives in Grand Haven, which is a safer community as you can get, a scared community, and I was talking to her and she said, "Yeah, I'm leaving. The crime is too high here." I said, "What crime?" Well, yeah, the
Grand Haven?
crime is really bad. Not just Grand Haven and Palm Coast.
Oh,
and I
I
said,
see.
There's no crime here. I mean, again, it's not that there's no crime, but in comparison to surrounding, just Volusia, St. Johns County, it is dramatically lower. And one of the things that we have here that people often don't see is that if you're in Orlando, you're surrounded by, crime, people committing crime, or any central location. We have an ocean to our east, so there's nobody there. To our west is 400 acres, well, not 400 acres, 400 square miles of farmland. So no crime, very little crime occurring there. On a northern boundary, we have a huge creek. We have Pellicer Creek, and a huge amount of open area, the National Preserve there.
Right.
And to our south, there's a huge divide between us and Volusia County. So we don't have a lot of bleed over crime in Flagler County, which keeps our crime down, which people don't always realize.
No, that's good, and I really appreciate it. We do these surveys every couple of years to the city, and then the city uses those as kind of long-term decisions and trying to decide things. And one of the largest or most commented on is this perception of lack of enforcement, and specifically speed limits and the enforcement of those limits. As the past acting sheriff, I know they're talking about lowering the speed limit, which I'm a big believer in. I walk on streets that have no sidewalks. Basically, the state says, it's against the law to walk on a street, but we know you have to do it, crosswalks, etc. I don't know what the answer is other than more visibility or law enforcement. And when I'm attempted to get data of how many stops and what were the tickets and where were the stops to see the effectiveness, I've run into pushback or directing me to put in requests for information. How do you let the public know that speed limits and road safety and pedestrian safety are important? Well, how would you deal with that?
So the way I dealt with it, and the way I suggest we deal with it, is that, first of all, people's perception of speeding is a lot of times erroneous. So let me just explain, is that there have been studies where they put people at a fixed point and have them determine how fast cars are doing. 90% incorrect. There's no way you can. But having said that, there's several ways. One of the things we did was that when we got complaints from, let's say, for speeding, what we do is there's a computer billboard that you put up, and it's not even a billboard anymore. Now it's a stick, and it will signal every time a car passes and what speed it does. So you could put them anywhere, and so whoever is complaining, put the stick there and find out if people are speeding and when they are speeding.
Okay.
So now you have data that you can now use to, to put patrol cars there or a COP car, where you say, okay, what we see is between 8 and 9 o'clock a.m., people are speeding down Ferber to get to Palm Harbor or Old Kings Road because maybe they're
It's
going to
across.
school.
So many cross-through traffic
Right.
now.
And so what you do is then you, for that period of time, you stick a patrol car or a COP car there, and you'll see traffic, those traffic.
Sure. It's that visibility thing we were
It's
talking
the
about,
visibility
right?
thing. So there, again, you can use technology to figure this out. I do believe, and also getting the deputies, which again, it's a boring thing. I mean, I do have sympathy for deputies. Just endlessly, patrolling is exhausting. I mean, it's mentally exhausting. But you have to stay on them and keep patrolling. The more they patrol, the less, crime there'll be, less, less traffic violations going to be. We talked a little bit about, the road dampening. I'm in favor of road dampening because it works everywhere. You go to the major cities and to Europe, there's road dampeners everywhere. It's part of life, and it's been there for.
So we're talking about the speed bumps or humps or whatever you want to call it.
So there used to be speed bumps. Now they're these called the road calming, where you can go over at 10 miles an hour. You don't have to stop and go over them.
Sure.
But my daughter lives in Washington, and on roadways that are connector roadways. You can't put it on every roadway, but roadways like Florida Park, which are connector roadways, or maybe like Fellowship, I think is like a connector roadway. These long roads where people are going between two,
Like arterials between
roads,
other,
right?
yeah.
That's where road dampeners help because it slows, people, slow them down. I don't believe it should be everywhere. And again, you can use these computer sticks that tell you exactly not only how fast they're going, but where they are speeding. So right when you make your turn, you're not speeding. It's probably in the middle where you're hitting your top speed, right? And then you slow down.
Sure.
So that may be, you only may have to put one dampener in, because to take off that top speed. If it shows that, you just don't put them there wherever you want. Just say, okay, let's throw them there. You put them in the areas that it's required by data.
Well, and I think that's what the study used because they were citing time frames and speed ranges. So they had to have, because that's the only way you would know. It's kind of like I couldn't believe on Woodbury, which I'm on quite a bit, which is a connector through the W section over to Whiteview, and they spent the most money on the least effective non-reversible effort by putting white lines on either side of the road without putting the yellow line, which because it's an arterial, they should have the yellow solid line in the middle, and the city admitted they now travel faster because of the white lines, and they can't remove them because they're painted, and it costs more than any of the other projects they did.
Yeah, Woodbury it's been a problem for as long as I've been here. And if there isn't a street crying out for road dampening, I don't know. And by the way, there are other ways to do things, not just with road dampeners, which people annoy people, is narrowing roadways. They've done it on A1A. The county has between the Hammock and Fraga Beach, which has become a speedway over there.
Yeah, they put the medium in it and made the roads smaller.
It slows. I mean,
it does.
Little things like
but
that.
But also having a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit helps as well.
Right.
Jim, we could do this for hours and hours. And we touched on a lot of things. And I know we're both passionate about the one thing that's important. We want Palm Coast to be the best city it can be for you and us. We're citizens. We live it. We spend it. We drive it. We see those things that are going on. Final thoughts? Because I'm going to have you back.
Yeah. I will say this, that every organization is a reflection of the person at the top. So I believe that the city has good people working for it. I believe the county has good people working for it because I've worked with them. I believe the constitutional officers have good people working for them. I believe the sheriff's office has good people working for them. So it's not a matter of we don't have good staffing. It's we have poor leadership at the top. So unless we demand better leadership, unless we say we're not just going to keep on paying taxes just because you demand it. You want to talk about efficiencies? We want efficiencies in our government that make sense. And if you're going to bring someone from the sheriff's office to create efficiencies in our city, then we want to see efficiencies in the sheriff's office, which is the main area where our expenses have exploded. But
Right.
you're not going to get that unless you get good people at the top, unless you get a good city manager in the city of Palm Coast, and that's for another day of how we've gone into the weeds on that. You're never going to get improvements because it's the city manager who runs it, it's the sheriff's office who runs it, and we need to hold them accountable for their mismanagement.
And that is the biggest takeaway. The citizens of this city, you are ultimately, you have the power, the responsibility within your vote. Ask questions, ask for data, ask to be shown whether you're coming from an efficient organization and where your money's going. All great comments. For the next time we're able to sit there. Jim Manfre, thank you so much.
You're welcome, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Guys, until next time, like and subscribe. Catch you later. Bye.